So, talk about some things in this week's parsha tied into the journey from Pesach to Shavuos, which we currently find ourselves in Sfiras Omer. Says the Torah, Katuv Torah. Dabru b'nei Yisrael lemor. Say to the Jewish people, Zos achai asher tochelu. This is the tochlu. These are the animals you should eat. Mikol behema asher al haaretz. From all the animals on the earth. Kol mafreses parsa. Every animal that has split hooves, v'shosh. Mafreses parsa v'shosh outside pratzos. Malageir b'behema also tochelu. That it has split hooves and that it chews its cud, and the hoof has to be totally split. That's the animal you could eat. So you need those two things to have a kosher animal.
So no horse.
No horses. That's kind of gross. That's the first thing you thought of. I don't know if you were really.
The French eat horse like crazy.
The French are gross. You can
Yes,
quote.
they are.
You can quote me on that. I was just reading about. French anti-Semitism. It's crazy.
Yeah, so why do our people hang out there?
Bison is kosher. Yeah.
Bison, yes. There's actually a restaurant in D.C. It's Native American that they prepared like bison burgers.
Oh, nice. Yeah, there was a place where I used to work in Brooklyn and near Red Hook.
Mm-hmm.
There used to be this Italian butcher shop, so it wasn't like a butcher, but they had meats from any kind of meat you wanted.
Really?
You wanted snake meat, you wanted what's it called meat? That means every kind of meat.
Alligator?
Alligator meat.
It's like RFK Jr. eating the roadkill. Okay, continues the Torah. This you shouldn't eat. Mamala hagera, if they parsa, those that chew their cud, but they don't have split hooves. It's a gamal, the camel. Kimala gerahu, because it chews its cud. Hu parsa einenu mafris tamehu lachem. It is does not have a split hoof. It is impure to you. So we have an animal so far. The Torah is enumerating animals. One, this is the animal that chews its cud but doesn't have a split hoof. That's a camel. If you ever had any desire to eat that, I don't know if that was at the shop also, but you can't eat that. Continues the pasuk. V'esa shafan. You can't eat a shafan. Kimala gerahu, because it chews its cud. Uparsalo yafres. It doesn't have split hooves. Tami hulachem. It's tame. Vesar nevet. The arnevet you can't eat. Kimala gerahi. It also chews its cud. Uparsalo frisa, but it doesn't have split hooves. Tamehi lachem. It's impure to you. Then the Torah says, this is what I want to talk about. Vesa chazir, the pig. Kimafris parsahu, it has split hooves. V'shoisa shesa parsa, totally split. V'hugera lo yigor tamihu lachem, but it does not chew its cud. V'saram lo sochlu v'nulasim lo sigo tmei mehim lachem. You can't eat it and you can't touch its flesh, which really means that if you touch its flesh, you become tame.
So you can't even be a pig farmer and sell to the goy.
That's also true, right? So we see that there is one animal that we have a bunch of animals that don't chew their cud and don't have split hooves. There are a couple animals that the Torah lists that chew their cud but don't have split hooves. But there's one animal that does not chew its cud but have split hooves, and that's the pig. So I want to talk about the pig. But first, I want to talk about the 4 exiles of the Jewish people, and then I'm going to get back to the pig. I promise. Just remind me if I don't. I was reading a book over Pesach called The Intellect in the Exodus. Highly recommended. It's by Rabbi Jeremy Kagan. He's a student of Rav Moshe Shapiro, who is a major thinker, Orthodox thinker. He passed away a few years ago. He's also a student of my Yeshiva, Aaron Feldman, so I'm very biased. But he wrote this book, and it was unbelievable. He talks about, we don't realize how each exile that the Jewish people were a part of, really, the intellect in the Exodus, it really impacted the challenges that we face in Emunah and connecting with Hashem. And he says we don't even realize it because we're just like so influenced and engulfed in the culture that we're in. We don't realize that there's another way to live and another type of personality that a person could have. For example, the first exiles, he groups the first 2 together. He says the first exile that we had was in Bavel and Paras, Babylon and Persia. That's when the Megillah. This is only after we were in the first temple. So Bavel and Paras, Babylon and Persia, he says what was going on there, the first temple was destroyed, the Babylonians destroyed the first temple, and then the Persians defeated the Babylonians. We found ourselves in both of these exiles. And he says what happened was the Jewish people were worshipping idols in the times of the first temple, and the first temple was destroyed by these people that were also idol worshippers. Now he says we have to put ourselves in their mindset about idol worshippers. The challenges that the Jews faced wasn't so much that these people didn't believe in God. It was obvious to them, it was obvious to these people that there was some sort of spiritual force in the world, that there was something going on. But they just believed it was idols. What they were telling the Jewish people is, oh, you think it's God and that God gave you a special message? That's not true. But to be a person who connected with something greater than the physical world, that wasn't such a challenge back in the day, because look, everyone's bowing to their idols. That was like a normal thing, not like the world we find ourselves in. Right? There's something there. They believed in idols, but they thought that these idols had some power that was, you couldn't see with your eyes. That was Paras and Baba. It says what happened after that. The next Gullus, the next exile, was Greece. Greece, famously, were the fellows who came into the Second Temple and desecrated, actually slaughtered a pig on the altar. And we have the story of Hanukkah where we fought back against them. So he says the Greeks were much, much different than the Persians and the Babylonians. The Greeks were the founders of philosophy, of thinking. They believed, or they were the first ones to really connect with abstract thought. He says before that, in Persia and Babylon, people could relate to, let's say you had 7 things in front of you. Right? You can count 7 things. But the idea of a number 7 as like this abstract concept you could think about, that was like foreign to the Babylonians and the Persians. That wasn't like something they dealt with. The Greeks, famously Plato, Aristotle, they were philosophers. They thought of abstract ideas. So that sounds very nice. That lets you think about Hashem and God. And actually Aristotle believed in a God, not the God we believe in, but he believed in a God, because logically he proved that God exists. Okay? Not the God that we have it. Now, so what's the downside of that? Sounds very nice. They thought of abstract thinking, logic. Says the pitfall is when you only have logic and you only have your mind, that doesn't leave any room for God, because you think that your mind is able to solve anything. And they believed in God, but they believed that God has nothing to do with the universe, because God is this abstract concept that has nothing to do with us. So meaning I can act however I want. Yes, there is a God, logically it makes sense, but I have nothing to do with him. So that was a big challenge for the Jewish people, because now we found ourselves in this climate where, we're intellectuals. This is the birth of the university. We're intellectuals. We're very smart. But the problem is that it bred an arrogance, a gaiva, that it breeds a pride. When a person's very smart, it's very easy for him to become prideful and to become a bal gaiva. See, Judaism, we're very pro-learning. We're very pro-studying, but it's only in connection with the humbleness that we recognize that all of the wisdom is coming from Hashem. For example, we recognize that there are certain things that our minds simply cannot grasp. We can't, in our minds, understand an infinite being called God. We can't. We understand how he relates to us because he revealed it to us, so we understand whatever he revealed. So what a Jew says is that, yes, God gave me this gift of intellect, and I'm able to figure out many amazing things. However, I understand and I recognize that it's limited, because my mind is just a gift from Hashem, and that's the humbleness. The Greeks said, no, my mind can figure out anything. Anything that my mind can't figure out, they said, doesn't exist. That's actually the birth of materialism. There's a view of materialism that many people have today, that there's nothing beyond the physical. Only things that they can perceive is what exists, and anything they can't perceive with the senses doesn't exist. That's why they come up with all these crazy theories that we talked about. Remember, I've quoted many times Sir Richard the Wanton, who said explicitly that science has to come up with absurd theories because we can't allow a divine foot in the door. This is a continuation of Greek culture. These scientists. The Jew says, my intellect could take me pretty far, but I recognize that there's a God and that it can't take me all the way. My intellect has to be combined with a subservience to Hashem and that recognition. Now, that's Greece. Then there was Rome. So Rome, this I never knew before. Rabbi Kagan points out that what Rome did, they did take a lot from Greece, but they weren't interested in all these theoretical discussions about God and this and that, the intellect. They were very smart, but it was all practical. He said, while a Greek would have been a philosopher, a Roman would be an engineer. How do we build this road? How do we get this accomplished? How do we build this court? How do we fight this war? The Romans just believed in the material world, the physical world, and that's it. Forget all this theoretical stuff about God. I could care less. That's what Rome is.
But they still inherited the same gods renamed from the Greeks.
Oh, so he mentions that point. He says that Aristotle said, or a lot of the philosophers said, they didn't really believe what they were doing. It was just like lip service at that point. Like it was like a communal thing that they went and gave Zeus, a basket of fruit or something or whatever they did. I don't know, but they didn't actually believe it. And the Romans, they didn't care about anything spiritual. They were just totally, their whole life was becoming wealthy, selfishness, power, and conquering the world. And that's what they did. The Greeks did that, but they also had this theoretical, analytical type of thing. Now, what's interesting is Chazal tell us that Rome is represented by the pig. Why the pig? The pig is the only animal that doesn't chew its cud, but have split hooves. It has the outer signs of kashrus, but it does not have the inner signs of kashrus. What that means is, what are split hooves? We only eat animals with split hooves because an animal that does not have split hooves is usually a predator. A lion doesn't have split hooves, has claws. It devours another animal. We don't want to eat lions and tigers and bears because they're spaced out on the word. Predators. Thank you. The guy that goes to yeshiva and not public school knew the English word. Good job. They're predators. Nah, he knows. It's good. So you don't need to go to good yeshiva. You'll be fine. They're all predators, and if we were to eat a predator, that would become part of us. So we don't do that. So we have split hooves. So even the pig has split hooves because why? Rome on the outside, they believed in civilization. They built roads. They were famous for their court systems. They had laws on the books. But inside, what does the chewing of the cud represent? The chewing of the cud represents a cow chews its cud. That means he eats grass, and then he spits it up, and he chews it again, and it goes down, up and down. He's content with what he has. He trusts in Hashem. He doesn't always have to be looking for other things, and he doesn't have to be searching. He's content. That means inside, he's a believer. He's a maimin. He believes in Hashem. So Rome, they had the outer signs of kashrus, meaning they believed in justice. They believed they wanted to make the world a better place. But inside they were rotten. They didn't believe in God. They didn't do it for a noble cause. The reason that the Romans had laws and court systems was because they needed society to function. If you don't have a society that functions, then I can't accomplish my selfish goals. How am I going to make a lot of money in business if someone could cheat from me? So we have to have a court system. But they don't care that there's no deep moral reasoning. It's a total shallowness. It's totally shallow. That's why Esav, who was Rome's grandfather was Edom, and his great-grandfather was Esav. Esav was very good at the mitzvah of kibbud av v'em, honoring his parents. Because to have a functioning society, kids have to honor their parents. Without that, it doesn't work. It was all utilitarian. It was just practical. We need these things to work. But there's nothing inside. There's no spirituality. There's no emunah. There's no trust in Hashem. In fact, he makes a very interesting point in his book. Who took over after Rome? The Christians, the Vatican. They keep the tradition going. And it was very interesting what they did in their religion. They have the concept of the Trinity, where they took God and they made him into a person. So even the spiritual, they took down and physicalized it, totally materialistic, which is a very interesting point that he made. So the question is, so we have all this. So how do we... so all of these exiles, Rabbi Kagan points out in his book, they were all challenges to our faith in different levels. And we find ourselves now in the Roman exile. So the challenge is very difficult for us because we're living in a society, right? We're in Western civilization. Western civilization came from Rome and came from the Catholic Church. That's where it all happened, right? We are the spiritual grandchildren of that. So that is a society that doesn't believe in anything spiritual, just believes in the physical. So the challenge of emunah, to be a person that has an inside that connects to Hashem, is very, very challenging, is very, very difficult. And he points out it wasn't as difficult in this sense back in the exile of the Babylonians and the Persians, because they were worshiping idols, but you believe in something spiritual? I believe in something spiritual. Rabbi Becher makes a joke. He says that they would view us as atheists, because you pray to one God? Like I pray to 1,000 gods. You only have one God, you're an atheist, But there was something called spiritual. We live in a society where if you're spiritual, people laugh at you. It doesn't exist. Like you have a mental disease or something. So how do we deepen our emunah? How do we deepen the connection to Hashem? Because Pesach, we were chosen as a nation. That's a time when we were telling ourselves that we're so lucky to be Jewish because a Jew, the center of the existence of the secular world that we find ourselves in, their center is in the material world, in their physical body. Like we're saying, their whole existence, Rome, it was just selfishness, to be powerful, physical pleasures, things like that. Whereas a Jew, Hashem separated us as a separate nation because the center of our personality is supposed to be our neshama. So how do we do that? So between Pesach and Shavuos is a time when we want to enhance our emunah, to make the center of our personality our neshama, our soul, and not our body. Because it's impossible that we're not influenced by secular society, because we live here, we're totally surrounded by it. So what do? So one might think that we can sit here and think of Aristotelian proofs to the existence of God, and logically prove God, and maybe that will deepen our emunah, deepen our faith in Hashem. But I'll be honest, nowadays that's probably not going to work. There could have been a time in history where people sat and came with logical proofs, and then they said, "Oh, right, I believe in God, and now I'm going to change my life." But really, emunah is not just an intellectual conviction. It has to make sense. You have to have that intellectual conviction, but really, it has to come from something much deeper. It's very interesting. He says this Rabbi Kagan. I was very interested in what he had to say because he wasn't born religious, and he had nothing to do with Torah, and he was majoring in philosophy in Yale University, and he had already thought to himself that the Darwinian theory of evolution didn't explain his existence, and just to view everything as strictly material, it doesn't make sense. And he knew from his own experience that there was something spiritual inside him. Right. The fact that we have consciousness, this is a big question that the scientists can't explain. If you don't have God, why are we conscious? Why do you have a personality, right? I have a personality. I'm a person, right? I'm not just a physical thing. That arising from what? Electric signals going in my brain? The scientists to this day have not explained this to anybody's satisfaction. So he thought,
ancient aliens.
Yeah, that too. But he said to himself, I know I have the essence of my core is spiritual. I have a spiritual being. So he said, it makes sense that if I have a spiritual being, others have a spiritual being, and that the world has a spiritual center. And he wasn't ready to accept Torah yet, but he said now that thought made him start looking for something. And eventually he started learning Torah, and he said, this makes sense. Once he had that inner conviction combined with the logical proofs that you could prove God, that helped him. Rav Elchanan said, Rav Elchanan Wasserman asked a very simple question. The first mitzvah the Rambam counts in Taryag mitzvahs is to believe in God. Okay. When do you have to keep all the mitzvahs? When you're 13. Okay, seriously, I teach 7th grade. Do we expect, no offense, do we expect, okay, well in that case, do we really expect 13-year-old boys to be able to prove to themselves that God exists? If this is something that Aristotle, Plato, Socrates grappled with, the Rambam wrote a whole book called Moreh Nevuchim, which a large section deals with that. We expect a 13-year-old boy to fulfill the mitzvah of believing in Hashem?
Yes.
So he says, yes. Why? Because emunah isn't a logical construct. Emunah is something that every person, by dint of the fact that he has a spiritual core, lives with an inner knowledge that there is a God. It is just obvious. It is obvious. It doesn't make sense any other way. The fact that every person believes deep down that his life has a purpose testifies to the fact that there's a creator who gave the world purpose. If there's no creator, then there's no purpose, and I might as well jump off the bridge. It doesn't mean anything. Now, if so, how come everyone doesn't believe in Hashem? So there's blockages. Averos, sins, block us from connecting to our inner self, which is really a reflection of the divine, a reflection of Hashem. So when we do Averos, when we have bad midos, we're totally cut off from that. Not totally. We get cut off from Hashem, so we can't feel it. So a person, right, it doesn't start that a person sits and thinks, I'm going to prove God, and he comes to a totally objective, logical conclusion, there's no God, and then he starts doing Averos. Usually, or all the time what happens is, a person starts doing Averos and then comes up with excuses of why he doesn't believe in God. When a person is selfish, and a person has these bad character traits, then he can't connect to Hashem. So really, a major part of deepening our faith in Hashem and deepening our emunah is erasing these bad character traits. We're going to find when we work on ourselves to become less selfish people, more selfless, to think about others and to think about what Hashem wants from us. The more we do that, the more our natural inner emunah comes out. It's not shot that we have to build up necessarily our emunah. It's there. It just gets blocked from Hashem. Just reading now, it's Hashkafa. I was learning Tanya. You can tell your friends on 26 Wikitunk. And in chapter 29, he says the Meraglim, right? The spies were sent out to check out the land of Israel, and they came back and they said, we can't go up, it's impossible, the nations that are already in Canaan, they're going to kill us, no chance. And the people cried, and then the people were punished, and Moshe reprimanded them. And then everyone changed their tune and said, no, we could do it. So he said, what happened over there? First you thought you couldn't do it, now you thought you can do it? Like, did you find new information? Was there a new scouting report that came that told you that now you're able to do it? No. Because really, he says, the Baal Tanya says, the Jews deep down, they had faith in Hashem that they could do it. But their Averas got in the way at the beginning, saying, we can't do it. They just, the Yetzer Hara told them, created this blockage, that their inner emunah, that Hashem can do anything, was blocked. So they said, they were scared, we can't possibly do it. And then Moshe yells at them, and that Yetzer Hara vanished. And then their inner emunah came out and says, no, we can do it, we can do it. That's how it works. So, during the days between Pesach and Shavuos, so practically, again, how do we work on emunah? We're coming to Shavuos. Pesach was the time when we became the Jewish people, in the sense that we recognize that our main existence is not our physical bodies, is not materialism, but our main existence, the main part of us, is our neshama, the part that connects to Hashem. That's what happened on Pesach. On Shavuos, we get the message of how to cultivate that self by following the Torah. That's what was given on Shavuos. So we cultivate that aspect of ourselves after we get the Torah. So we have the 49 days from Pesach to Shavuos are a time when we work on building our inner emunah and connecting to Torah. So one way to do that is by studying Torah. Reb Chaim Brisker said, learning Chumash with Rashi naturally improves a person's faith in Hashem. Just learning Torah itself. Forget logical proofs. Just the spiritual act of learning Torah causes the neshama to come out. And also, if you look at the 6th chapter of Pirkei Avos, we're not going to go through them, but there are 48 things that a person has to connect to be able to acquire Torah. And if you look through them, most of the things have nothing to do with study. Most of the things are like being humble, having friends, not focusing too much on physical pleasures. Because since Torah is a spiritual wisdom, we need to cultivate that part of ourselves to limit selfishness and to think about other people. And when we do that, and when we train ourselves to get rid of those bad midos, one, we're going to acquire Torah, and two, our natural emunah is going to shine forth. And when we learn Torah, that also brings out our emunah. So that's the job of a Jew during these times. Besides not shaving and besides listening to bad a cappella music, the job of a Jew is to study Torah more during this time, and also to work on our character traits. Because when we work on our character traits and learn Torah, we connect more to Hashem. But the chiddush I'm saying is, it's already in us. Right? It's there. God put it in there, this connection. It's just blocked. So we just have to clean ourselves off and remove the blockage. Hashem, we should all do that. But don't worry, you have 5 minutes.